Now, I'm sure throughout our lives, we've all done some foolish things, made some bad choices and some poor decisions, and perhaps we've regretted those at the time or even later on when we've considered the results of our actions. Maybe we've said things we wish we hadn't, promises we made that we couldn't fulfill, or perhaps started something and we couldn't finish it. And often the worst thing about some of these mistakes or choices that we make is when we don't learn from the lessons that we needed to learn and have kept making the same mistakes over and over again. But on the other hand, I'm sure we've all done many wise things in our lives. We've made good choices and decisions which have made a difference at the time, and we could be reaping now the benefits today of those things, those choices we've made, things that we've done, and they'll benefit us for a long time, even into the future. Wisdom can also have a good influence and impact on other people, either by our example or by wise words or advice which we can bring to people who might trust our input into their lives. So wisdom is a foundation to enjoy life, to be blessed, and to be a blessing to others, whereas folly only brings unnecessary heartache and pain to ourselves and others. So as we're continuing to look through the book of Ecclesiastes, we're going to look at some of these principles of wisdom in chapters 7 and 8 today, where there were lessons that Solomon discovered in his life that he'd learned, and by observation of others, by looking back on his life, he could reflect on some of the wisdom of life, some of the folly of life, and some of the principles that we can learn ourselves, and I'm sure have learned over the years. So we're going to read some verses from chapter 7 and then look at some of the principles that we can find from chapter 7 and 8. Not going to read everything, but just to give you some verses to read, and then we're going to look at some of the principles that we can learn from. So we're going to read Ecclesiastes chapter 6, just the final verse there, verse 12, through chapter 7 to verse 12. So it's Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 12. For who knows what is good for man in life, all the days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? Who can tell a man what will happen after him under the sun? A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. Better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Surely oppression destroys a wise man's reason, and a bribe debases the heart. The end of a thing is better than the beginning. The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Do not hasten in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely concerning this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, and profitable to those who see the sun. For wisdom is a defence, as money is a defence. But the excellency of the knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. So the first thing that Solomon says here, there's 8 things which I think we're going to cover. We have to be fairly brief with each one of them. But the first thing he says is, honour and a good name is better than riches and wealth. And how we lived our lives can have more benefit and impact on others than even the joy and the hope of the promise at the beginning of our lives. So what that's saying is, you know, we all know when a new baby's born, you know, there's joy, there's excitement, we're all happy, whoever it is. It might have been our baby when you had one earlier in life, it might be your family. There's always joy, isn't there, at the thought of a new baby and the life it brings. But nobody knows what that life is going to bring. And sometimes lives are well lived, but others are often not well lived. And the promise we had at the birth of a baby has only brought heartache and disappointment through somebody's life. But having a good name and honour, Solomon says here, is when you come to the end of your life and people can see that you've lived well, you've been a good example to people, and you've left good things in people's lives, then that is the best that we can be of all that we've lived in our lives. And how do we have a good name? By being consistent, faithful, reliable, dependable. This engenders trust in you. You know, if you're not reliable, you don't keep your word, people can't trust you, can they? But if you're a person of your word, if you're somebody who's reliable, faithful, that's somebody that people can trust. Being kind and considerate, helpful and encouraging, rather than gossiping or slandering. Someone who's calm and peaceful rather than angry. Someone who's patient rather than critical. What are you like? And what do others see in you? Who do you see who is a good example? People with a good name are people we like to be around. And the impact of their lives and the good memories of them live on beyond them when they pass away. What are we leaving in people's lives as an example and somebody that we can be known to have cared and loved for people, being faithful and dependable? The second thing that Solomon says here is the virtue of sobriety, or being sober or serious, rather than being humorous to the point of being disrespectful. Or perhaps, you know, when we're disrespectful, we can be sarcastic or rude. You know, it's good to be humorous, but not to be to the point where people find us rude or irritating or disrespectful. We all have different personalities, don't we? Some of us are a bit more serious, some of us are a bit more jovial, and it's good to have differences of personalities and complement one another. And you know, I tend to be a bit more of a serious nature. Somebody once described me as a serious person. I didn't like that. I thought, surely not. You know, I enjoy a lot of things. I think I've got a good sense of humour. But I think it was with people who said they enjoyed life, but much of their humour was irreverent, it put people down, it was frivolous. And I didn't want to take part in that type of humour that they called normal. But as someone who's kind of viewed as a bit serious, that's a good thing, Solomon says here. You know, I take my responsibilities very seriously, you know, whether it's at home, at work, at church, but I hopefully don't take myself too seriously. And that's the difference. It's being responsible, but it's knowing how to have a good sense of humour. The serious side of me comes out a little bit when we play games, don't we? Sometimes more and I play board games or card games together. But that's not always been easy for Maureen to cope with, because I'm quite competitive. I take it a bit too seriously sometimes and enjoy it a bit too when I win and not so much when I don't. I think I've improved a little bit over the years. But we all have side to us where we need to take our responsibilities seriously. The next thing that Solomon says here, it's better to be patient rather than hasty or rash in the words we say when we're provoked, when angry, not to retaliate, but also not to make hasty decisions. It can be being pressurised into making a quick decision, impulse buys. Doesn't cause too much harm if we're out in the shops and we see an item of clothing that we want to buy and we just buy it on impulse. But if we go past the car showroom and buy a new car that costs thousands of pounds without thinking about it, and that can have a few repercussions, can't it? So not to be too hasty in our decisions. More in line, we've made one or two over the years, but nothing too serious. But to consider our actions and to plan for the future is always a good thing. We could get upset at work and change a job too quickly. All manner of things can upset us and cause us to make hasty decisions sometimes. When we're a bit vulnerable, we can make decisions that we wouldn't make if we're kind of a bit more calmer and in a better frame of mind. I heard a preacher a number of years ago talking about this, about making decisions when we're vulnerable, and he uses a word, halt, just uses the letter of that word, H-A-L-T, as when we can be vulnerable, when we're hungry, when we're angry, when we're lonely, and when we're tired. That's when we can be vulnerable, and sometimes we can make decisions that are better left for another day when we're feeling better. Don't feel under pressure to make decisions. Consider things, consider the long term, and make our decisions wisely from there. The fourth thing that Solomon says is wisdom is more important than health, than wealth. Wisdom is more important than wealth. We can be wealthy but not wise, and this will just lead to problems, or can do. A good instance of this is the National Lottery winners. How many of those have won, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of pounds, and then within a few years, they've blown all that money and they're back to square one? Because they had wealth, but they didn't have wisdom. It's better to have wisdom and no wealth, because then we can know how to live with what we've got, and we can be more satisfied and content with what we do have. We need to be wise with our wealth and income so that we can manage our resources better. We need to meet the needs and responsibilities of our families. We can be givers, be generous, helpful and kind to others, and that God expects us of that. And we can support the church. We can help those in need and be generous and spontaneous at times. To be wise with our wealth means that we can plan for the future. The two best decisions that myself with Maureen have ever made with regard to our finances, the first one is to tithe 10% of our income to God through the church. I've done it, we've done it for 40 years now, and never ever regretted it. We've got 10% less, so you would think, but God blesses the 90%, and it goes further than the 100% would have gone in the first place. God blesses us for that. And the second thing is that when I started work, and then since Maureen and I have been married, we've always paid into a pension so that we can have a good income when we retire. And I've been having some discussions with regard to our pensions over the last few months, and it's been worked out with what we've contributed over the years that our income when we retire, which is not too many years away, is going to be larger than our income in all the years that we've been working. That's good planning for the future if you're able to do it. But in whatever way you can, we all need to plan for the future, being wise with what we've got. You know, saying no to something today so that we can have something that we're going to need in the future when the need requires of us. Being wise with what God has given us. The next one that Solomon says here is that we need to submit to God's will and His working in our lives rather than trying to direct everything for ourselves. Good things and bad things happen to everyone in life, both to the godly and the ungodly. Matthew chapter 5 verse 45 says, God makes the sun to shine on the evil and the good, and He sends the rain on the just and the unjust. We all live in this world, and many of the same things happen to us, whether we're righteous or unrighteous. There are days of prosperity, blessing, when we can be joyful, and there are days of adversity. And Solomon says, consider them and let God make the most of these days. Bring bad out of the worst. We all, whether we're godly or not, we have days of joy, we have days of sorrow. We all go through the same things in the world, but God is with us to direct us. Job, in all his sufferings, had to learn to trust God and know that He directs the course of our lives. This can give us great assurance that our lives are in God's hands. There's no need to worry or fear, but we trust the Lord. In my many years of working for the same company at Boots Opticians, I've changed direction many times, as has the company have. I've had different jobs, different roles over the years, had to make a lot of changes, but my job has always been safe because the Lord has given me and He protects me. And although there have been many changes that I've had to go through over the years, I've instigated very few of them. The company has said to me, I want you to work here or work there or do that role or that role. And you know, I've gone along with everything that's happened. But what has that been? Has that been men, women making choices for me? No, it's God. He directs the path of my life. People don't. God does. We don't know what the future holds, but we can trust God that He can direct us into the future and know that our life is safe in His hands, whatever the future holds. And you know, with work at the opticians, we're about to go through some very big changes in our branch in the next month or so, and a lot of the staff are very worried and fearful about what the future is going to be. And you know, I'm kind of a bit uncertain, but I know that, you know, God has been with me through all the changes that have happened over the years, and He's not going to leave me now. He's going to take me through this next change, and He'll take everybody else through it. And who knows, the days that lie ahead could be better than the days that have been behind, which is what Solomon is saying. We've had good days behind us, but if there's changes, does that always mean the things up ahead of us are going to be worse? No, it doesn't. It means God is with us, and He can bring us to new things. He can bring us to exciting things. He can bring us into places, meet people we've never met before. We never dreamed we would do things we never thought we would. But God leads us and directs us, and we can trust Him. Some want to know the future. You know, people, you know, they read their horoscopes. They go into all kinds of things to know what the future is going to be. But I find, and I'm sure we do here, that it's much more enjoyable not to know the future. We walk by faith. Yeah, of course there's uncertainty, there's a bit of anxiety at times, but we walk by faith because our lives are in God's hands, and He leads us to blessing, and He leads us through the challenges and hardships. And I don't want to do anything without Him. And I'm sure you don't either. The next one that Solomon looks at here, number 6, moderation is better than excess and in bringing us contentment. So excess can be in many things: eating, drinking, spending money, but it can also be in our behaviour, so that we're fearful, we're anxious, we're worried. As we all have cares and responsibilities, but to be calm and gentle, not acting angrily or overreacting, but reacting in a measured way. James chapter 1 verse 19 says, "Let everyone be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath," or slow to anger. I'm just going to read a few verses from Philippians chapter 4. So Philippians chapter 4 verse 4. "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand." And gentleness there is moderation as well. Let your moderation be known to all men. "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." Gentleness or moderation, it indicates a readiness to listen, a yieldedness that does not retaliate. By being calm, it means that rather than being anxious, we can give our concerns to God, and He will give us His peace. Number 7, Solomon says here, "We will never know all things, but we can trust our lives to God who does know all things." We'll have many questions, but a lot of them are never going to get answered here on earth. How do we respond? Why do the wicked prosper and not get punished for their evil? Why do good things happen to good people? We all have these questions, but often we don't have the answers. Solomon says here, "Leave it to God. He who will in due course bring judgment upon the wicked, but will reward the righteous." We will be rewarded for good. We receive some of that reward here, now on earth, but in heaven we're going to get an eternal reward that's going to last forever and be better than anything that we can ever receive here on earth. Just a few verses from Proverbs chapter 2. Proverbs chapter 2 verse 7. "God stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk uprightly. He guards the paths of justice and preserves the way of His saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice, equity and every good path. When wisdom enters your heart and knowledge is pleasant to your soul, discretion will preserve you. Understanding will keep you, to deliver you from the way of evil, from the man who speaks perverse things." God directs us. He leads us, and we can put our trust in Him. Wisdom, knowledge, instruction will direct us. It keeps us on the right path and from being led astray by the wrong people. Being led astray by people that can lead us into sin. God protects us when we have His wisdom within us. And then the final one to look at here is having a submissive attitude to both authority and to one another, even if we do not agree with everything they do or say. Submission to authority is pleasing to God, but leaders should also care for those in their care. But when they don't, God will deal with them. But having a compromising, flexible attitude is good, because we can't all be right all the time, can we? And we should seek to live peaceably with people as best as we can. And to live at peace and to compromise, in a marriage, you have to do it all the time. You've got differences of opinions on loads of things, but you have to have that attitude, don't we, with one another, in our marriages, in relationships, that we want to be submissive to one another and care for the other person, and not have that attitude that I'm always right and you're always wrong. It's good not to have the last word all the time. And sometimes it's best to be quiet even when we know the other person is wrong. That's a hard one, isn't it? And, you know, at work for me, you know, and I'm sure we've all got it in different situations in life. People have different values and different opinions on lots of different things, but we learn to get on with one another, living at peace. And we can know God's peace as we love and care for one another. So we thank the Lord for all of these lessons of wisdom that we can learn in life. And we ask, Lord, that we would have your wisdom to know how to live each and every day, to live with one another, and to know your peace and your contentment in our lives. We thank you and we ask you that we would be able to live as you would want us to live each and every day. In Jesus' name, amen.